Grief has settled somewhere strong, and I can't say good, but for me, it's where it needs to be. The difficulty is older people, for them to understand it's almost too late. It's almost too late to ask them to confront this. And that's always been something that I don't fully understand, but I do understand. If somebody you love passes away, you have to have the ceremony and everything by the Friday. It isn't necessary. You can take your time. I was 12 and my father died in really tragic circumstances. I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. It was considered you were too young to see the grief. And it also really played on my mind for many years. As I grew up, I thought, well, I don't think he is dead.
Don't Be Caught Dead, the show bringing stories of death back to life. Here's your host, Catherine Ashton.
Today I'm speaking with Kathie Shearer. Kathie has lived a life as colourful as the East End of London where she was born, and as expansive as the fairways she walked alongside the greats of golf world. Marrying Australian golf legend Bob Shearer in 1975, Kathie became a respected media manager in professional golf, running tournament media centres for 3 decades. In 2001, Australian Golf Digest recognised her with a special Services to Golf award, nicknaming her the woman who tamed the tiger. Outside sport, Kathie has been dedicated over 20 years as a marriage and funeral celebrant, guiding people through life's biggest milestones with honesty, humour and compassion. Following Bob's death in 2022, Kathie channeled her lived experience into writing Last Orders, a book about preparing for life's final chapter with courage and clarity. Thank you so much for being with us today, Kathie.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
I love the fact that you're described as colourful as the East End of London where you were born, and I love the fact that we've just been comparing our very colourful tops that we're wearing today. So I like the fact that they're a woman who's not afraid of colour. So tell me, that is quite the life that you have led, especially during that very high profile period with the golf tournaments and walking alongside Bob during that stage of his life. Tell me a little bit about what that was like.
Well, it was so different to where I was, how I was brought up. I come from a very working class family. We all had jobs. And if you didn't have 2 or 3 jobs, my grandmother would try and find you another job. And then to sort of walk the fairways and know this was how you could make a living, I loved every moment of it. I thought, this is marvellous. I mean, we're walking out, the sun is shining. I'm not thinking of anything too much. And it was just a complete contrast to where as I said, how I grew up, how we were a very working class family. My grandmother had a marvellous saying. She used to say, only the very, very rich and the very, very poor don't work, and the rest of you get yourself a job, or 2 or 3. So it was a contrast, but I like to think I embraced every part of it.
And tell me, what were you doing prior to this role where you were running the media centres for these tournaments? What was your role prior to meeting Bob?
Well, actually, that's how I got the job, running the media centres. I did promotional work. It was years ago. I worked for a cigarette company and they sponsored everything. They sponsored the golf, they sponsored the tennis, they sponsored motor racing, they did show jumping. We did everything. And I had met Jackie Butterworth / Newton. She was Jackie Butterworth. We were young women in London, and her great friend had a company called Sales Charm. And Sales Charm used to provide the girls to do the promotional work. I mean, we weren't grid girls. We certainly didn't have sort of bunny outfits. We were dressed in jackets and pants, and it was just to promote things or to be where you needed to be. A little bit like the Emirates girls, but we weren't quite that glamorous. But they would give you uniforms to wear, and you would smile, and this would be and the cigarettes would be available. We never sold cigarettes. And when I say a cigarette girl, people imagine that I've got one of those big trays in front of me,
Yeah.
selling cigarettes. But that was the start of it. And as I said, Jackie Butterworth had started to date Jack Newton, and it was at her birthday party that I met Bob. So I've kind of gone from what I did beforehand. I was trained in accountancy, which is a long stretch, a long bow from where I ended up in promotional work.
Yeah, it is.
I met Bob at a tennis tournament in Bournemouth, and he was playing at a 4-ball tournament in Bournemouth, and the guys, the tennis players, would go over and watch the golfers, and the golfers would come and watch the tennis players. So I wasn't working in a tennis tournament when I met him. I was working at a tennis tournament, but he was playing in the golf tournament in the same area. And that was it.
And what was it that attracted you, Kathie?
He was so calm, and I'm not so calm. He was slow speaking and not too many words, where I suppose it was the opposite that attracted me. He was kind of steady and strong, and I never knew that I would like anybody like that. I always thought I wanted somebody to be a chatterbox, the same as I am, but he was very, very nice, very calm, didn't rush anything, and I think that was the thing that attracted me most. And they were rather naughty. Jack Newton, Bob Shearer, Ian Stanley. Although they were calm, they really didn't seem to, that they cared, but they didn't care. You know, if they went out to dinner, it would be great fun and they would be noisy. And back in the early 70s, they were so different to an English fella if you were going out with an English fella, you know. So that was a great attraction as well. So very good.
And talk us through those next sort of, 20 years or so that you were, how long were you in the actual tournament and running the media centres there? Talk us through that period of time.
We got married in 75. I had my first son in 77 and my second in 82. So during that period, we were travelling and, I was a tour player's wife and that took up all our time. They used to play much more than what they play now. Now they sort of play 19, 20 weeks a year. And I can remember one year, Bob was on the road 42 weeks. He was a real journeyman playing, and we would travel with him, especially with my first child. And then we came back to Australia, and Graham Marsh, another great golfer, was running a tournament at Royal Melbourne in 1989. And Bob had played with Graham, and Graham said, "Your wife used to do this kind of thing. I need somebody in the media centre, not to run the media centre. He already had somebody to do that, but somebody there that had a knowledge of Melbourne, had a knowledge of sort of the media." And that was the start of it. And I remember Bob said, "I've got a job for you." I said, "I don't want a job. I've got 2 children. I don't need a job." He said, "No, you like this. You really like this." And that was the start, the Coca-Cola Classic at Royal Melbourne.
And was he right? Did you like it?
I loved it. I loved it. I can remember the first day I was there, somebody said to me, "Can I get you a coffee? And would you like something to eat? And are you comfortable?" I thought, this is sort of, is this what work is all about? It was like a secret. I never knew that this was so good. I thought, oh my goodness, this sounds fabulous to me. And that was the start, 1989. And then the following year, IMG approached me and asked if I would do a media centre for them. And then I sort of became in charge, and that carried me through for just over 30 years. Quite something, here and overseas, and in England and in America. So quite something.
And tell me, Kathie, what was one of your favourite moments during that period? Or 2 if you'd like.
Well, it's always, it's great. Do you mean when I was on the tour or when I was in the media centre, or both?
Any time during that period. What are your favourite memories from that time?
I think the travel. I think just been with the boys. I think, we were living in America part of the time. We lived in South Carolina. We lived there for about 9 years on and off. We would always come back to Australia and then go to England in between. The travel never worried me. The boys, as long as they were well and safe, and Bob was ticking it over, when he won, it was great. When he didn't win, it was still okay. And then during the media years, I suppose some of the best times were when I was doing the interviews, because back then, the media would ask you for the players to come in every single day. Every single day they wanted somebody to come in. They never left the media centre. They were quite characters in their own right. And now it's so different because they interview at the beginning of the week and they interview at the end of the week. And in between, the press can hustle around and get their own stories, or every now and again they'll have somebody in. But when I was at the helm, they wanted it they wanted Greg Norman every single day. They wanted Tiger Woods every single day. They wanted Ernie Els every single day. And that was where I thought I did well in enticing them to come in.
And what sort of carrots did you dangle to get them in every day? That's a huge commitment when they're also playing professionally at the same time.
Well, Greg could be awkward, but never with myself, as he'd had his first overseas trip to Palm Springs, where my husband, Bob, and he represented Australia, and he was quite a young man. And so he knew Bob, so that made life very much easier for me. And I got to know him. In fact, he was one of the first calls after my husband died. He called to ask how I was doing, and we've kept it's a really lovely friendship. But he could be difficult. But as I say, I was very, very lucky, and not with me. I don't think there was a time that I asked him to come in, and he didn't come in. However, when there was somebody that I didn't know so well, like I can remember Sergio Garcia, and he didn't want to come in, and he hadn't done well. And I would sort of always frame it to say, if you come in and give me 10 minutes, I'll take my watch off, I'll put it in front of you, and I'll explain as you sit down to say, Sergio has 10 minutes, we have 10 minutes, ask the questions now, because then he wants to go and whatever, see his wife, go and practice. I said, otherwise, the media will try and phone you in the hotel. They'll send somebody to wait outside. If you just do it now, you are done for the day. And that was always a good line and I would take my watch off. And in 10 minutes, I'd say, last questions. And then, that was it. I'd make everybody sit down. And I would say, we are now leaving the building. Elvis and I are leaving the building. So just everybody remain seated, and if they stood up, sit down. And then they could get away. And of course I could get away as well. So that was just a little ploy.
And Kathie, I think that would probably be really good skills to then actually apply as a celebrant as well.
Yes, it's very good skills to have when you are involved in somebody's funeral or in somebody's end-of-life celebration, or it's a good skill to have if you find that somebody is, how can I say, extending what needs to be said. And everybody has their time and everybody has their moment. And I've done a funeral where there's been sort of 10 grandchildren that all want to say something. And it's lovely for them to say anything they want to say and then have a gentle tap and have the next one in. I think orchestrating, that has really been terrific for me when I've sort of come on to do funerals, or I've done them, as you know, for just over 20 years now. And that the sort of, as I say, orchestration of a really good funeral is something that I think is very important to know how to do it.
Because it is like a performance, really, isn't it? and everyone has a role to play in the right format, in the right order. And like you said, allowing the appropriate amount of time for those who are also sitting there viewing the the ceremony as well.
Absolutely. You can tell people are engaged and you want to really celebrate the life. You want them to come away and say, oh my, that was timely. It really represented exactly who they were, and they would have been happy with it. Or that's the kind of underlying, not only is the family who in grief is rather pleased with how things have gone, but also for me, am I representing that person the way I feel, after having meetings with the family, at least a couple, to say, how do you see this? How do you want it to go? What would please you? What would please the newly departed? How can we do this together? How can we make this where their friends, where their family, where their acquaintances really can understand who they are?
It's interesting because when you're describing it like that, that's exactly what you were nurturing in your role back in those media centres, was actually making sure that the image was held of the particular professional player, that everyone got an opportunity to speak. So those skills have certainly had a mirroring sort of way in celebrancy by the sounds of it.
I suppose so. I hadn't really thought of it that way before. I just seen myself as a person that could manage groups of people or try and really speak to them and understand, what they wanted or how they wanted. And for me in turn to say, this works beautifully and we'll do it this way if that suits you. So trying to understand, well, I suppose so, what the pressmen wanted, and also understanding the player, as I was married to a player. And he gave me the greatest line of all, where when I started this and I said, Bob, how can I make this a success? And he said, you've got to remember one thing: good play, good behaviour; bad play, bad behaviour. And that set me in marvellous stead for the next 30 years.
That is very, very wise, very good advice, isn't it?
It certainly was. Certainly was, yes. And there were some real curly ones, and just to understand, but I thought I really always had a bit of a leg up there when I was working, because they knew I was married to Bob, obviously. And even though he wasn't around all the time, I think they knew that I understood, that you're pretty miserable if you've been out there all day, or it's very hot, and then you come in and you finish with a couple of bogeys, and then the whole day seems to be wasted, and you don't want to talk to anybody. You don't want to explain anything to anybody. So that's it.
And Kathie, can you give us some insight? I, in a previous life, managed professional boxers, and so I am familiar to a degree about someone who, from a very young age, has all that they've focused on is a particular sport, to the point that they've actually got at an elite level within that sport, and they are generally a world leader in that field. And from my observation, what I have seen is, therefore, they have been conditioned to be the focus of everyone supporting them and everyone around them during that process from really their very young years. And then the flip side of that is when they are no longer achieving those levels or that elite sort of professional sort of stage, their change in that support network. Sometimes a lot of that support net falls away. And tell me a little bit about what you've seen in relation to, when you've seen the people that you've dealt with and managed at a very elite level, and then perhaps on the other side when their career is in decline or no longer achieving the great heights they once were. Tell us a little bit about that insight.
Can I just preface that to say I'm so jealous of your previous career. I was brought up reading Ring magazine. My
Wow.
father was a light heavyweight, and he boxed under the name of Alfie Jackson. I'll just be very brief with this.
Oh no, don't be brief. I love this. Alfie
And
Jackson. I'm writing that down so I can tell my husband so he can look it up.
a light heavyweight Alfie Jackson, yes.
Yeah.
And my grandson's name is Jake Jackson, after my father. And he would wake me in the middle of the night and tap me on the shoulder so we could watch Sonny Liston. And
Yeah.
I mean, we were just, he had Ring magazine. I was brought up in the boxing environment. And when I was a cigarette girl, they would sponsor boxing, and we had these beautiful velvet dresses with like silk jabots, and none of the girls would do the boxing because they didn't like all of the you know how
Yeah.
every boxing match. And in England, men would come in their dinner suits and sit at tables and watch the boxing so putting that to one side, I'm jealous, and I'm not jealous of anything, but I'm jealous of your former career.
Well,
I've always thought I'd like to be a referee.
Oh, I actually got asked to be a referee, which
Stop it.
was, this was early 2000s that I was asked because I resigned from the role when I had my son, and that was in 2004. But we would actually put on 3-course dinners or 3-course luncheons at the powerhouse at Albert Park, and anyone who knows that it's right on Albert Park shore, overlooking the beautiful lake, and they would be very well sponsored. And it would be a title bout, and everyone would be sitting down in their best dress clothes watching the fight, very similar to how you were recording or in those days in England. So I was very lucky. It was around the time of the Kostya world title fight in Melbourne, and so we were involved in that. And so it was another world, very, very far removed from what I do now.
Oh, my goodness. I remember when I first came to Australia and Bob took me to Festival Hall and I saw Jimmy Thunder.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, this is fantastic. So we were just talking
Back to
about
what you asked.
just not many people get to see. Everyone sees the athlete at their pinnacle, their prime, but not many people see or understand when those supports and that prestige is no longer there, and the money and the purse is no longer as large as what it once was. A lot of that support falls off, and that can be very challenging for the athlete. And I'm sure you would have seen that over your career in the media centre. Can you give us some sort of insight about what you notice during that period of someone's career as they're sort of going into the more twilight years?
Well, that never really happened until I'd been in the business some time. And I can remember an English golfer called Paul Casey, and I interviewed him. We were in Sydney. He was playing there. And it's the first time I'd ever heard a golfer say, my team. And I thought, oh, what's he talking about, team? Because prior to that, in my husband's era and even with Greg Norman, there was never a team. But Paul Casey said, well, I've got my physio with me. And I thought, my goodness. And funny, it always stuck in my mind. It was years ago. He had a team. And I remember thinking, well, is he paying this team? I mean, he's really got to earn something to have this team with him. I think they were all really friends, and he made out that he had this team. Well, he didn't make out, but, and we're eating this and we're eating that. I'm sure it was just his friends with him, but he made a point of it. And then, of course, it became the norm, and I can always remember thinking, oh, my goodness, you've got to play well, because you're not only playing for you, but you're paying for the team, and the team must all be telling you, you can do it. This is how we do it. You're nearly there or you're not nearly there, and building them up. And of course, everybody now has a team. Everybody has what you're eating, what you're exercising, and they're earning far, far more money than they ever did back then. But it is quite something to see, and I've seen it quite a lot where they've had successful careers, for maybe 1 or 2 years. And, the wives are more bouncy and the Rolexes are more evident and different things like that. I've always been a very interesting observer of people. And I've seen such a lot of people and they're sort of in the high life and then it does go on to decline. And I'm always surprised that there isn't more, or it's not known if they, have mental troubles. It was never spoken about, but it's tough. It's very tough. Years ago, you could play, I can only really speak of golf. You could play 4 rounds and not get paid. They didn't pay anybody. And you had your caddy expenses. But that's entirely different now. But it's sad to see. Some accept it better than others. Some have very lovely, strong family lives. Others don't. Others, they all have to put body and soul into it. And I don't know what to say. I mean, in my case with Bob, it was very hard for him. It was hard for him. He played a lot socially at Southern Golf Club. And he had that as the most wonderful backup. When he came home, it didn't matter how he'd played overseas, but he had a lot of years playing well, earning a good living. But when he came back, he played a lot of social golf at Southern. So when he did retire, or when he said to me, I can't hit it over a dustbin, there was somewhere for him to go. And his friends were waiting with open arms for him to come back. And he could always play better than all of them anyway. So it allowed him to gradually decline.
And that's interesting because that is something that you probably hear mirrored with families when people are either diagnosed with a life-limiting illness or when you're gathering loved ones around to talk about someone when they have died. Is it the social network that is the most important thing and their loved ones? Like, what is the things that we talk about around that table when you're preparing the ceremony, Kathie? What have you found that matters the most in the end?
Family and friends and social life and how you relate to people, how, we all hope that we'll hopefully get to our 80s or, in a perfect life or whatever. And you hope that you still have 1 or 2 friends there or more. Or I look at shopping centres sometimes and I see lots of men sitting around there, especially Italian men or Greek men. I just love that kind of thing. And when we talk to families, the loss is tremendous, but to find that common ground, to find that the songs that they've sung have not been left behind, that everybody can remember when he was at this Christmas party or when she was, she broke into song. In my mother's later days, she sometimes couldn't remember a thing, but she always wanted to go back to Las Vegas. And she could, when we were in the car, could sing word for word John Denver songs. And, just those things that really make you human, even though that we're, at the end or coming towards the end. It's so important, that interaction, and that's really all we have, is how people, when they hear our name, they smile and think of a memory that they have or, something they've done together or something that's made them laugh or been a bit silly. And that's the kind of thing I think that we maybe all, I know that's how I want to be remembered with my boys and my friends. And that's how I would always remember, I remember my husband as well when, he would say something and he would laugh hard and really tears would come to his eyes. And for my father it was the same thing. I lost him early in my life, but he laughed till he cried. And they're the things that I still think about. I still can tap into those memories. And I think that's what life is all about, really. For me, it is.
And tell me, what was it like when Bob died in 2022?
Well, it was so sudden. Bob hadn't been, I can't say he was sick, but he'd had diabetes and he was on insulin. He did have a defibrillator. Over the years, he sort of, with the journey of time, he still played golf 3 and 4 times a week. And in fact, he played on a Monday with the old guys on a Monday, and he died on a Sunday. But on the Saturday, I remember having a conversation with him. He said, he didn't feel so well. He said, I don't know, I feel a bit wobbly, but it had a bit of vertigo, and everything had been addressed in a timely manner. And on the Saturday night, he said, I don't know, I feel a bit dizzy. I said, you're going to play golf on Monday? He said, oh, yeah, I'll be okay tomorrow. And I said, oh, radio, okay. And he had his clothes ready. So I didn't have that lead in. We'd conversed, of course, a lot because of what I did and, everything that I'd done. And we were married 47 years on the Monday, on the 10th, and he died on the 9th. And for so many, particularly men, particularly his friends, have said, that's for me. That's what I want. That's exactly how I want to go. I just want to one day there, be preparing for golf, next day not be there. I said, well, that's good for you, but dreadful for those left behind. And that was the catalyst. This book has been an itch I've tried to scratch. You've just got to be, I don't say prepared, because your family will have their own ideas, but just in a time of grief, you want to be in a position where you know that it doesn't have to bankrupt you. Funeral directors certainly have a place. Certainly, and for many religions it's vital, but for the rank and file, there's other ways to do things. And if you just I think I said in the book, it's like booking a cruise, and you want the best room, and you want to get the drinks package, and you want to have everything, and book it and then forget about it. Just leave it to one side, but know when it's time, you have a point of reference that you can, say, well, I'd really like this. I'd like this to happen. And that gives, I always think, for me, it's a love letter to my 2 sons. I want them to know, I want them to be not prepared. I love the life with them. I'm crazy about them. But I want them just to be able to pick up something or see something and say, oh, that was it, or that, she liked that music, and, just want to keep the way it is. I want the London Philharmonic Orchestra singing, playing, just different things like that, Catherine. That's just for me. That's only my ideas, and that's what made me write the book. It's only you can read the book in 2 hours, but it's got just places where you can write things down and maybe make life easier, make decision-making easier.
And tell me, Kathie, you mentioned that you had always had conversations with Bob about end-of-life planning. How early did those conversations start?
I think when he became unwell, but even a little bit before that, because it was so much easier for us to address. I did a number of funerals for the members of Southern Golf Club. The partners had asked me they knew what I was doing, although it's really been, I've never advertised, I've never sort of said this is what I do, but it's more word of mouth. And then Bob had seen me do these, and we discussed, oh, that was good, and I didn't know that about him, and I didn't know this about her, so it was a much more open conversation than if we just, sitting having dinner and saying, well, look, now we're 65, 70, we better start talking about it. It was something that, organically, it just was always there. I knew he wanted to be cremated. He knew I wanted to be cremated. I knew what music he liked. I knew he loved the Eagles, and we had Take It to the Limit. And then the golf club, which was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. We had it there, which was his home from home. So for me, as difficult as it was so much easier than lots of people that I've seen in this position that just don't have a clue, don't know where to begin. And I just poured into something, and then stood back and thought, oh my goodness, I would have done things differently then.
And tell me a little bit about the book. You say that it would take someone to less than 2 hours to read it. Tell us a little bit about what was the thing that really was the itch that you referred to earlier that motivated you to actually write it?
Well, the book is called Last Orders Before You Go, and I took that from, in England, I'm sure it's the same here, but in the pubs in England, they would always say, last orders, ladies and gentlemen, which means you better get to the bar and get yourself a drink because the pub was closing. So that's where the name Last Orders came from. And then the strapline is A Book for the Living, the ultimate guide to dying happy. And that was the premise of it, is to show you there's so many different ways to do things. You don't have to have a director from, funeral director. You don't have to. You can question things, do you want this? Do you want your pillow to have this on it or that on it? Or do you want the book to be, you can get a special book and this will be a memory and you just need to say, I'd like to be cremated. I'd like to have a great big party at the RSL. A friend just had a big party there because everybody there was a senior. So they had a marvellous meal. It's just fabulous. And you can have sort of a private room and have an absolute knees up, or you can, as I did with my mother, and after we were finished at the golf club with Bob, they came back to the house and I think in the book I write about Costco sandwiches to have. That there's different ways to do it. You can still have somebody there orchestrating people to come up and talk and yet not have to be in a chapel somewhere, or you may choose the chapel and then leave the chapel. I know with my mother, they said, well, I needed somebody there from who she was cremated from, and they said, you need somebody there. I said, why? I said, I know what I'm doing, and you need this guest book. I said, no, I don't. I'll get one from Officeworks. It was just tiny things. You don't have to be forced into anything, and just a little bit of preparation, just a little bit, and you can be, you could be home and host. These, just as a by note to this pay as you go funerals, or pay before you go, and they say that your family won't have to worry. And I'm sure in many, many, many cases that is it. But in many, many cases, there are always extras that you have to pay that are, that need to be done, even with a prepaid funeral. And they say, this is new. Many years ago in the East End of London, you would pay for your funeral. Somebody would come and you would give them sixpence a week. And sixpence a week would cover your funeral. Because they were big funerals. And when my mother was unwell, she would always say to me, you've got my funeral money. Have you got my funeral money? So this prepaid funeral, to my knowledge, goes back nearly 100 years, where you would pay a little bit a week to make sure that you had a big fancy funeral. So.
And tell me, do you remember when your father died? You said that you were quite young. Do you remember what sort of funeral that he had? I'm assuming this is back in England?
This is back in England. And no, I don't. Because I was 12 and my father died in really tragic circumstances, I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. They kind of shipped you off to an auntie or somewhere. It was considered you were too young to see the grief, to see everybody there. And it also really played on my mind for many years. As I grew up, I thought, well, I don't think he is dead. I haven't seen him, and I think they're just lying to me, and he's just gone away. And even I was sort of in my late teens, and I can remember seeing somebody walking in front of me. And my father was very distinctive. He was a very big chap, very big, and he was very poor growing up. He used to have his shoes made later in life, and he'd always have suede shoes because he had sore feet. He always said because he never managed to he was one of a big family of boys, and he never managed to get the right size shoes for him. So that's what he said, his feet were sore. And I saw a man walking in front of me, and he used to wear a navy blue raincoat, certain make of raincoat, aqua scooter it was. And I saw this man, and I thought, that there he is. I mean, it was years after. And I ran ahead, and I turned and looked at the man. And, oh, of course it wasn't. But that was something that resonated with me. The need sometimes to see, only if you want to, and just to understand and to have that closure. I'm a great believer in having something to punctuate the end of your life, for everybody to gather around and say just how they feel. And I think that's a very important part of living.
And you mentioned previously about how you've allowed in your ceremonies that you've been involved with as a celebrant to have all of the grandchildren say their little bit and then just tap them on the shoulder and allow each of them to have their say. What are the other techniques that you've seen or ways in which you've incorporated children to be involved in ceremonies?
Well, it's very much up to the children, but more importantly, that the parents have had a word with them. The worst thing is to have a child up there that's so terribly upset. And this goes for anybody who's speaking. We understand everybody's upset, but you really must try and deliver as best you can. I know, when I've been upset too, and I've stood there and it's been particularly somebody that I know or somebody that I've really got to know, and I've had to stand back for a second, or I have a technique where I kind of put my nails into my hands just to gather myself and step back. It's no good to be such a mess when you stand up. And I always say, just write out what you're thinking of saying. And if you feel that you're too upset, I'm just on your left, I'm just standing behind you, just out of the way, but I'll just step forward and say what you need to say, or have a contingency plan where when children come up, it's often, most of the time, one of the parents will come with them and stand with them, stand beside them. And that's a technique that, and they'll write something down. And if they do get upset, then they've got something, or the parent or somebody, or if they'll look to me and I'll know it's time to go forward, and we'll all stand there together. And I'll just say the words, but they're there. But as I say, it's terribly important that you're able to say them. You think you can, you'll be able to, and then you get up there, and it doesn't matter what age they are. It's tough. It's very tough. It's tough for everybody. It's tough when I'm trying to orchestrate it, not because it's going wrong, but to see them, not for me, but to see people so terribly upset and they want to say it. That's why if they've written it out, it will be said, and they're standing there, and I just kind of take over and say, this is exactly what he wants to be known about his granddad or his mummy. This is how he feels. This is how it should be. But for when my mother died, my son, that was a bit of an amateur filmmaker, 18 months beforehand, had interviewed my mother and asked her different things. And we had it in, I think it was the Boyd Chapel, and they had 2 screens. This is in Springvale, which is a big, big crematorium. There's all different chapels there. And I started it by saying, thank you everybody for being here. And my mother wanted a big funeral with lots of flowers. And I used to say to her, Mum, you don't belong to, I'll do the best I can. But, she lived in Australia, but I said, I'll do the best I can, Mum. And I said that, and then I said, well, instead of me talking about my mum, my mother's going to talk about herself. And the screens came up, and my mother's first words were, well, if you're listening to this, then I'm in life everlasting. And then she went on for 17 minutes and talked about the war. And at about 10 minutes, I said, not much more to go. And then we finished it off with Patsy Cline's Crazy, where I said, she made me crazy. She drove me crazy. I'm going to miss her like crazy. And we cranked up Patsy Cline Crazy. So that was that was fabulous. That was, and you can just do it on a phone now. But if you've got elderly parents or a grandma or something, it might work for you. You never know.
On the platform that we have the ability at the end of each day where we ask people about what was the first pet they had when they were a child, what was the first job they had as for pocket money. And, I now have my mum's voice recording of all of those. She wouldn't let me video record her, but she would allow me to audio record her. And that's priceless for myself and for my son and the other grandchildren within the family, That's amazing to have that.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not something you go to every birthday. It's not something, but every now and again you think somebody mentions something, you say, well, I've got something. And I had it all done on, used to be CDs,
Yeah.
and I had my mum speaking and everything, and I had a lot made and sent them out to those that couldn't be there.
Yeah, that's lovely.
It wasn't a time where you could now pre-record. Now you can, everybody has, you can just tune into funerals now. They're all live streamed, but not back then. So technology's changed for the better.
And just when you were mentioning Springvale, at least, your mum wasn't in good place because they have one of the largest rose collections in the Southern Hemisphere. So she certainly got her English flowers in that location, that's for sure.
We had huge flowers, huge, from family that couldn't be there in England. They sent Gates of Heaven and all sorts of things because we were such florists. That's how I grew up, that she would have been very, very, very pleased with the flowers, and she'd been very, very pleased that she was talking at her own funeral. Mm-hmm.
And now, thinking about Bob, and it's now been a few years since his passing in 2022, what does grief look like now for you when you think about his death?
There are still times, even 4 years on, where I forget that he's not there. And I think, oh, yeah, I'll get a bit of fillet steak, Bob will have that. And then I think, oh, that surprises me. I've got 2 sons and I've got a grandson, and they are very present and very there. And I feel that he lives on with them. Actually, this week I'm just on my way to, am I going to Hobart to see my 15-year-old grandson play football. And Bob's great love wasn't golf, it was football. And
oh, wow.
Collingwood, and he's no great player, I have to tell you, before we just plays on the Mornington Peninsula. And he plays on the Mornington Peninsula, and we would go there every Sunday, and I would listen to Macca on the radio. And I still do that during the season. And it's like Bob is there. So the grief is there, but the joy is there. And I'm always grateful to him for showing me this life, for us going along in it together, and also for giving me plenty of space so I can just hang myself. He was, well, you go and do that and I'll keep here. So grief has settled somewhere strong, and I can't say good, but for me, it's where it needs to be. I question my life more. I have stopped doing weddings because with weddings, they like to book you a year or 18 months in advance, and I can't promise that anymore. I can't promise where I'll be or what I'll be doing in that time. So I've very much now concentrated on funerals. Of course, I'm sad sometimes when I see couples that we knew that, of course, are still, they're going out and doing things or going on holidays and things. And am I sad? I'm wistful. I'm sometimes a little wistful that I'm not going there, but it sits okay with me. It just sits. It's there. Oh, I was actually listening on the ABC to Bob Carr, who lost his wife of 50 years. And he said something so poignant, and he actually broke down and he said, you lose somebody who thinks you were special and you thought they were special in your own way. And I thought, gosh, that's something. You know, your partner thinks you're special. That's why you're together. And in your own way, you think they're special in their own way. Other people don't see it, but that's how you feel.
And you spent 47 years. You were one day short of 47 years. That's a long time. How do you see Bob being remembered now, of someone who was in a very public life? You referred to the fact that Greg Norman was one of the very first phone calls you received after Bob died. How do you view him in a public reverence or way? Because that's something that a lot of people don't get to see, is that you knew the man both publicly but privately as well. And how do you see him being remembered now publicly?
Well, it's so marvellous what's happened to Bob. After he passed away, he actually got an OAM, and Southern Golf Club built a statue of him. The same guy that made the statues all around the MCG, they commissioned him to make a statue, a bronze of Bob. And it's Bob and 25% bigger than Bob. And when I first saw it, I went, oh! And it's Bob in full flight, hitting a ball down the first fairway of Southern Golf Club. I mean, it is spectacular. It is marvellous. And they have, it's lit of a night time. And they've also had a painting done with all members of Southern Golf Club over the last 80 years that have helped the club. It's just, and in the middle is Bob holding the Australian Open trophy and a big board with his win. So I'm in such a privileged position. And I feel that's been so marvellous of what they've done there. And I can always go there and look at it. But it isn't for me, it's for the generations. It's for my grandson. They've made my sons and members there. For him to come along and say, that's my pops. So I'm in such a unique position. I feel so blessed that not only was he my husband, and he was the father of my children and a grandfather and a friend, that he has been recognised by his golf club in that way. So for people that don't have that, for people that, I think once again, as I said before, it's the memory. It's when you're out and the name comes up and somebody kindly says something very nice about your partner, or do you remember when I picked him up or when I picked her up and she was singing, or even in her final days when we saw her and, gave her a kiss and she said I remember the song that they always hummed, or where they came from, or what she was proud of, or what he was proud of. That's personal, and that's still very personal for me. And I don't go to the golf club all the time and think, look at the statue or kind of think, isn't that good? It isn't that way at all. That's for the next generations to see. And I'm so grateful. And the president there at the time, Peter Anderson, he was wonderful. He was, he played every Saturday with Bob at the time, and he was marvellous, and how his memory is kept on there and will, I hope, for future generations when I'm no longer here, and for my boys and my grandson. So lucky, very lucky.
But it's interesting because your book itself, Last Orders, that is also something that will leave a legacy, because when you will have seen the difference that it makes when someone shares what their wishes are, and the impact that has on the loved ones surrounding that person when they die, compared to when no one knows the wishes and the impact that has.
The difficulty is older people, for them to understand it's almost too late. it's almost too late to ask them to confront this. And that's always been something that I understand. I don't fully understand, but I do understand. They just don't want to, in these retirement villages. I did stand up and speak in one, just the once, just before the book was published. And they didn't want to hear what I had to say. It's almost like it's the children. It is a gift if you can do it, but I do understand you get to in your 80s and you think, no. And I've quoted in the book a great friend of mine who's in his 70s, who's my age. And I said, Ian, what, have you told your family, beautiful family, gorgeous, close? No, he said, no, I'm leaving it all to them. And I hear that time and time and time again. I'm leaving it all to them. No, I don't want to address this. No, it's too much. I said, but it's a gift that you give them. It's a gift to say, I want to be cremated and I want Long Way to the Top if you want a rock and roll played. I want, just give them that. Just give them, go to the Berwick pub, or just give them the local RSL, or just say, just say, I want dim sims and sausage rolls for everybody to eat. And I want beer. I only want beer. And if you want something else, you buy it. Just give them that while they're grieving and while they have to make a decision within a week. And if there's only one complaint, I can really say that you need time. Don't be rushed. Don't think if you have, if somebody you love passes away, that you have to have the ceremony and everything by the Friday. It isn't necessary. You can take your time. You can, especially if you're cremated, and you can say, let's wait until the ashes are there, or it's entirely your own choice, but you often can't get the ceremony you want. You can't understand the life that you want in 3 or 4 days, but it is really, it's a great interest to me when I'm with older people. And one of my closest friends, one of them said, I can't read the book. And her son-in-law said, it's not for me. I don't want to address it. And they're close, but she said, it's all right. I said, give it back to me then, Pat. So she, no, you've signed it to me. I said, well, it's hopeless. But then I come across it so often. I just want to forget it. No. They'll see to it all. They'll clear out the house. They'll do it all. Yeah, but anyway. So it's, I don't know who it's aimed at, but it would be great if you could read a chapter and then say, Mum, I need you to answer this to me. Just a single word. Do you want pink? Do you want blue? Do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want a big ceremony, or do you want to go with Dad? Or Dad, do you want to go with this? Or do you want to be mixed in the same ashes? Or I've also developed something that's called Love in a Rock. And it's because I never knew what to do with the ashes. They come back in like a block. And it's a rock, and you put the ashes in the rock, and there's a plaque on the rock, and then you seal them in. And that was also because I thought I have to do something. This has been going on for some time, because when my father died, we had to go to where he was buried every week for the first couple of years. My mother would want to go every week and be in the forest, put the chrysanthemums there. And every Sunday, and I found it it was difficult, but I thought every week, and this is like a portable rock that should you downsize, you take the rock with you. So the rock is there. I've got Bob, I sometimes put him next to the fire in the winter. My mother's in the shade. It's in the garden. So it's like a big rock that's there. I just didn't want them sitting on where all the books are. So that was another thing that I just tried to make things easy, slide things through, make it easy when it's so not easy, when it's so difficult.
And is there any other thoughts that you have on how we can make it easier for people?
Just talking. And the timing is everything. And don't leave it too long. Do it when you're feeling at your best. And that's what I say in the book. Do it when you're happy, when you're all together, or when you've had such a great Christmas or a great birthday or something. Don't do it when you're ill or you're feeling sick, or you're trying to find a time where you think, oh my God, this life is beautiful. And I'm in the garden and I've got a cup of coffee. And I think now I might be able to address, right, when I won't be sitting in the garden, not having a cup of coffee, just jot something down, just put something down, just to, whether it's this book, Last Orders, or whether it's just something that they'll find, or give it to your solicitor, or just do it in a time where you're really thinking, oh my God, aren't I lucky? Isn't life beautiful? And write that down. On this day, on this month, at this time, life was so beautiful. I just want to tell you that I want my passing to be beautiful, and I want you all to remain beautiful and understanding, and know how great it's been, and maybe how you've made it great for me, boys will be boys, husbands will be husbands, wives will be wives. There's always a time where you can have a fight or two, but don't do it then. Do it when you're just feeling pleased with and grateful. I think grateful is a word that I use a lot. So grateful for what I've had, grateful for what might come in the future as well. Just to be grateful, I think. And then pick up the book and write something in it. Today I'm grateful. It's just a start. Put it in your handbag. It can go in your handbag. So anyway, that's it. It's only my philosophy, and everybody's got something different to say, but just try and give them a clue. Give somebody a clue on how you feel and how you'd like them to feel, or maybe tell them how great they've been in your lives, or how people have been in your lives, or great friends they've been, and may it long continue. Just, I think, to reiterate that anything that you do is a love letter. Anything that you do is not thinking of yourself. It's thinking of what you leave behind. And that's all we've got. We're all going somewhere someday.
Yeah, that's so true.
I think that in the book, there's lots of quotes in the book, different things, and I've written it to the Shearer lads, who I love, and the great saying, a Native American proverb, when we're born, the world rejoices, and when we die, the world cries and we rejoice. And I like to think maybe that's it. And, there's another one, Time for Another Drink, Jack Daniels, the last words of Jack Daniels. There's quite a few last words, and am I dying, or is it my birthday, Lady Astor? Just different things. And they really are the last words that they say before they close their eyes. Errol Flynn and Groucho Marx. I found that very, funny and slightly amusing.
No, that's great. I love it. And I think that's a beautiful way to leave our conversation, Kathie, and leave those thoughts with the listeners. I think that's very beautiful.
Thank you, Catherine. I've done a lot of talking.
Oh, I've enjoyed every bit of it. Thank you so much, Kathie.
Thank you very much indeed. And don't ever get away from the boxing. I just love it. Watch all the fights. Love Anthony Joshua as well. Gorgeous. Yes.
Oh, my husband pays far more attention than what I do nowadays. So thank you so much, Kathie.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Don't be caught dead forgetting to subscribe. And here are some more videos we know you'll love.